Alright, now let's come to inverse kinematic analysis. The way we have seen for forward kinematic analysis, we are given the joint coordinates and we need to find out the pose. We need to find out the end effect coordinates or the operational coordinates. So for that thing we do attach the coordinate frames to the links, and we have something called as DH parameters that basically tell us about the link configuration and the attachment of the links. And then with those DH parameters we get the rotation matrices, or then we get the transformation matrices, which we call as homogeneous transformation matrix. These homogeneous transformation matrices, the last column actually gives us the coordinates, the positional coordinates of the end effector, and the 3 by 3 matrix gives us the rotation matrix of the end effector with the base frame, which is nothing but the unit vectors of the end effector frame expressed in the base frame. So obviously we have now positions and orientation of the end effector given by the transformation matrix, homogeneous transformation matrix. Now similarly we have inverse kinematic analysis. This is inverse to that. So we have given the end effector pose, or given the end effector coordinates, or given the operational coordinates. What are the joint coordinates required, to actually reach to those coordinates? So this is typically very important in robotics because we generally deal with the task and in the task space we are interested in as a user or as an end user. So we would like a robot to perform a certain task like pick and place, or like welding, like spray painting, or like milling, drilling, and other operations. So that is generally in task space, or you can say the operation space or the operational coordinates. Now to perform a particular task we would like a robot to actually move accordingly. Since we are not much interested as an user about the joint coordinates, so we would like the robot to to compute those joint coordinates for a particular end effector application. So in inverse kinematics you may see this robot performing a milling operation on this block. So if a robot is desired to, let's say, do some task like this, move along this direction and then move along this direction, so we are actually as a user interested in these things. But for all these things, these denoted as the operational coordinates, which could be for a 6 degree of freedom robot, it could be, or a general application, it could be x, y, z, and maybe theta, psi, and phi. So we have the position and the orientation of the robot, which is generally specified, and for all these things at different places we have different values. So for all these particular values we will have, for each value or for each position and orientation, we will have a specific joint coordinates for this robot. So that means what is this joint angle, what is this joint angle, what is the joint angle here, what is the joint angle here, and what is the joint angle here. So we have, maybe for this type of robot it may be a 6 degree of freedom robot, so we will have a particular relation between the end effector coordinates and the joint coordinates. Alright, so inverse kinematics is actually finding out these thetas for a given end effector pose. So these are also called as task space coordinates and or pose of the end effector. So generally we have seen by forward kinematics also that end effector coordinates are actually related to joint coordinates by the transformation matrix. So obviously we will use the same matrix here again, but we should understand that this matrix T that we have found actually contains several nonlinear things, like it contains transcendental functions like sine, cosine, and etc. So generally the relation between x and theta is a nonlinear containing transcendental equations. So to find out theta from there is generally non-trivial. It's not so easy. So we generally resort to some particular methods for solving these joint variables. Now the process of determining the joint coordinates for a given pose of the end effector is actually referred to as inverse kinematics. All right. Now this is just an example from the internet. I have taken these from Google search. So this typically depicts a tool-link manipulator, again a tool-link manipulator here. This is again a tooling manipulator performing a particular amount of task. You can see that for different x and y as it varies, so you have theta and phi, which is varying. So theta may be referred to this and phi may be this angle, the angle at the second joint. So what is the value of theta and phi for a particular value of x and y? So I hope that is clear now. Now the difference is just this way. Forward kinematics is given the joint angles, you get the position and maybe the orientation. And in the inverse kinematics, given the end effector position and the orientation, you find out the corresponding joint angles. So these are the steps. So you have robot DH frames, or you can say frame attachments and DH parameters defined. Then we define we find out homogeneous transformation matrices. So the position and orientation of the end effector in the base frame is generally found out from that. And then use those equations to find out both the forward kinematics and inverse kinematics. Now, inverse kinematic equations, it's very important to understand the concept of the workspace, the dexterous workspace, the reachable workspace in these things, because then only the solutions may exist, or they may not really exist. We'll see that later. And then you may have something called multiple solutions, and then we will discuss the method of solutions. So workspace defines the region where the end effector actually can go, where the robot end effector can actually reach. But if we talk about a simple example of a two-link serial manipulator which has two links, one here shown as green and the other red. So workspace is nothing but the points where this end effector can actually reach in this whole space. So since this is constrained by these joints, so this cannot really go anywhere. Though it's a planar manipulator, so we have a plane where this can go, but it has a specific area where actually it can reach. Now there could be two cases where the length of the both links could be same. So in that case you can see there is one link, green link, and then the red link overlaps this green link and comes back to this point. So if we talk about the actual workspace in this case, it could be like the lengths, two links stretched together. So like this, I'll just show it here. Now this is the limit. So this is L1 and this is L2. So a circle with L1 and L2, L1 plus L2 as the radius will be the workspace of this manipulator. So if L1 is equal to L2, then we can see that the robot can, the end effector can go back to this origin somewhere here and actually can touch the origin, but at maximum it can go to L1 plus L2, which is 2L1 or 2L2. And similarly this link can be of different lengths, so the end effector can go to L1 plus L2, maybe here in this case up to here somewhere. But if we turn it back to this point, so it may not actually touch the origin. So it doesn't really come into this region in any case. That is something with these type of robots. But when we talk about workspace, we have something called as dexterous workspace and reachable workspace. All right. So dexterous workspace is the workspace or the space, or you can say volume, or you can say plane, which the robot end effector can actually reach with all the orientations. And the reachable workspace is the volume or the plane where the robot end effector can actually reach in at least one orientation. So in this case, if we talk about the reachable workspace, so this point is reachable workspace. So if you draw a circle out of this also, so this is all these points on the circle actually are the reachable workspace. So this can actually reach to these points. Similarly, for L1 not equal to L2 also, you can have a circle like this, which is actually the reachable workspace. So in this case, this point again is the reachable workspace. So this line and this line actually are the reachable workspaces. All right. So, but in this case, the reachable workspace can be a bigger circle outside, and then this point. So this whole is the reachable workspace. So where the actually end effector can at least reach at least in one orientation. So it can actually be oriented at least in one. It can be the orientation between the two links can lead to reaching of this point. But you have something called as dexterous workspace, which means the volume or the plane or the place or the points where the robot end effector can actually reach with all the orientations. So if you talk about tooling manipulator, in this case, if you talk about, so at this point the end effector can reach with this orientation, but it cannot reach with other orientation, which means to reach to this point the links have to be oriented in this way. But if you just try to move this link and the other link, so they will come to this point, so we'll have different points. Alright, so this doesn't mean dexterous workspace, this is again a reachable workspace, but in this case you're reaching a point with these two links having an angle between the two. So if you take this point now, so both links again are at this point, so these two links again make the same angle, so that means these two links actually can reach this point in different orientation of even link 1 and link 2, so like this. Alright, so in this case this point therefore becomes the dexterous workspace. Alright, so for robots with complicated structures, you may have really spherical, or sorry, you may have a 3D workspace, a volume of the workspace, and some of which could be actually dexterous, and most of it is actually reachable. So that's why dexterous workspace is actually a subset of the reachable workspace. Now the second thing with inverse kinematics happens is you have multiple solutions, which means that the end effector actually, if it's here, so the possible joint coordinates for this, if we solve the equations, are suppose this angle which is theta 1 and say this angle which is theta 2. Alright, so theta 1 and theta 2 with this configuration will make us reach to x and y position. But if you see this kind of diagram which is dotted in dotted lines, you can see that this angle, maybe this one which we can call as, or we can, if you take it positive like this, so theta 1 and then this one theta 2, so theta 1 theta 2 combination will also lead to you to x and y position. So this is the problem in inverse kinematics, you have multiple solutions. So this generally you will see later on that you may get some function like sine theta is equal to something, then cos theta is actually plus minus under root of 1 minus sine square theta. Alright, so this thing always happens. So you have plus and minus, where we call as, this type of configuration is particularly popular. This is called as elbow up, and this is known as elbow down configuration. So this type of configurations are there in robotics. You can basically keep one of them, use one of them wherever you actually use in robots such type of examples, or sometimes there are physical constraints with the joints. The joints may not really go to this place. Obviously this solution is the only solution. So that is something that that we generally see practically when we use robots. So this is another example of a 3-link robot, an anthropomorphic arm. So you have a spherical actually workspace for this. So you see there is one joint, revolute joint here, and the other two revolute joints are coming out of the plane, out of this paper. So one configuration to reach to this point could be that again elbow up and elbow down. The other configuration could be that this solution exists with this one, which is something like this from the top view. So if this is the configuration, so you have elbow up and elbow down, two solutions here, and elbow up and elbow down for this solution, so 2 plus 2, so 4 solutions for this type of problem or for this type of robot. Alright, so for complicated robots actually you have multiple solutions. For a general 6 degree of freedom robot with non-standardized parameters, you may even have 16 solutions or 16 equations have to be solved. You have the inverse kinematics really becomes complicated. Alright, now how do we solve these problems? Is we have something called as you have seen here, we have something called as algebraic solutions, geometric solutions, and numerical solutions. Algebraic solutions are those where you have a closed form solution, where you have an equation relating the end effector with the joint coordinates. So the equation is pretty straightforward. You find out a relation between the x, y, z and the thetas. Geometric, you can take advantage of the geometry of the manipulator. Sometimes very simple manipulators can be solved with geometric methods, which are like taking the advantage of the structure of the manipulator. You can actually do some geometrical manipulations and actually find out a solution. And problem robots where you have complicated structures, where you have the polynomials relating the end effector coordinates and the joint coordinates would have a solution. So you need to resort to numerical methods. So that's why in robotics it's generally understood as a thumb rule that you should design robots in such a way that a closed form solution exists, because closed form solutions are very fast and they're accurate. Numerical solutions tend to have tend to be a little slower than the closed form one, because there's a direct relation in closed form one. So numerical solutions are generally avoided, though we can do them. Such things can be used, but in robotics it's generally a thumb rule that you should try to use a closed form solution. Alright, so let's look at the closed form algebraic solutions. Now we have a very simple robotic manipulator, a serial 2-link robot. So assuming that the axis of rotation of these two joints are out of the plane or out of this paper, or you can say out of the board, so these two links enable planar motion of this end effector. So which means that this end effector actually can go along x and y directions. So let me just put this to some clarity. Now which means that this end effector actually can travel along this and along this direction. So now let's denote this by px and py as the coordinates of the end effector. So now obviously this px and py, or you can say simply x and y, actually are related to the joint axis and also to the length of the links. So we have seen by writing down its DH parameters, we can come up with the transformation matrix, for which for this case 2-link manipulator is actually very simple. So it's like this thing on the right. So you can see that we have very simple expressions. We have 0, 0, 1, which is the z axis of the end effector frame actually hasn't actually changed, which is true from here, because we can see that the z axis actually is same as the z axis of the previous joints, or you can say the world frame also, or the inertial frame, or the base frame. So we have something like this: a1 cos theta 1 plus a2 cos theta 1 plus theta 2, and similarly we have the second row and the third and the fourth row. Now we know that from the definition of the transformation matrix, or from the definition of the homogeneous transformation matrix, we know that the first 3 by 3 represents actually the rotation matrix, and the last column actually, or the first 3 elements of the last column actually refer to the position of the end effector in this 2-link manipulator. So in a way we can see that px actually is equal to a1 cos 1 plus a2 cos 1 2, which is evident from here. Now similarly py, the y coordinate of the end effector, is actually given by a1 sin theta 1 plus a2 sin theta 1 plus theta 2. Now this is very simple. We know from our basic DH parameters and frame assignments that we can come up with this relation. So this relation is actually a nonlinear one. The nonlinear functions sine, cosine, they are also called as transcendental functions. Now given a particular px and py, for example, we want to trace a circle, we want to trace any other a 2 degree of we can say a planar shape like circle or ellipse or any other arbitrary shape, we need to find out the corresponding thetas for this. So at every point of x and y we can evaluate thetas for this case. Now with some mathematical manipulations like squaring and adding of these equations, you can call them equation 1 and equation 2, squaring and adding them, something like this would result. We have cos theta 2 is equal to this. So px and py is given in the problem of inverse kinematics. a1 a2 are constants, so we can solve for theta 2. But it's not that we evaluate theta 2 from here, but rather we calculate the sine function of this. So we write sine theta 2 is equal to plus minus under the root of 1 minus cos square theta. Now this is done because we want to finally evaluate the theta 2 actually using a tan 2 function, whose arguments are actually the sine and the cosine value. So specifically we use this function because this function has certain features in our you can say MATLAB or in the mathematics. So this function actually takes in the arguments, the sign of the arguments into consideration. So which means that if we have something like this a tan 2 and maybe this is y comma x, so we can say for the particular sign of x and y. So if y is positive and x is also positive, then the angle theta 2 actually will be in the first quadrant. And if we have y positive but x is negative, so then in that case the a tan 2 function would actually give us theta 2 in actually quadrant 2. Similarly, if both are negative, so we'll get in quadrant 3, and similarly in quadrant 4. So this is actually in contrast to the tan inverse function, where actually it doesn't really know which quadrant actually to be taken, so it rather evaluates y over x actually. And even if we have y is negative, so minus y and minus x, so tan inverse would not give us the third quadrant, rather it would give us something in the first quadrant. So that's why we use this a tan 2 function. We call it as arc tangent function, or can say arc inverse tangent function. So this is how we calculate theta 2, and similarly we can substitute back this theta 2 into these equations and find out theta 1. So now for this case it's a very simple planar manipulator, so we can easily find out a solution like this, so which is actually called as the closed form solution. Now similarly we can do it for the 3-link manipulator. So we have one link, second link, and the third link. Px, py, and phi denote the coordinates of the end effector. So we have an additional coordinate called phi, which gives us the orientation of the end effector. So if this red whole link denotes the end effector in this case, so we can orient the end effector actually the way we would desire. So rather than the previous one, we have two links, we can just make it move along x and y direction, this end effector. But in this case we have an additional joint and additional link which acts as an end effector, so we can orient any object placed on this end effector. First we can make it move to some place and along x and y, and we can also orient it actually along the z-axis, which finally makes it a third degree of freedom, which is phi in this case. So we have 1, 2, and 3 coordinates of the end effector actually specified, and we would like to know the relation between them and the joint coordinates. So for a particular position of the end effector and the orientation of the end effector, we would like to know the values of the corresponding joint angles. So this is the typical transformation matrix for the 3-link planar manipulator. So you would notice some additional terms like a3 cos theta 1 plus theta 2 plus theta 3, and similarly here. So in case of the DH frames being attached to the origin or the link, we may not get these additional quantities, but this transformation matrix, actually homogeneous transformation matrix, is devised out of the convention where you attach the link to the end of the frame, or you weld the frame to the end of the link. So in that case we would have these additional things. So both the approaches can be actually used for the kinematic analysis. Now in this case again we have Px, which is given here, is equal to a1 cos theta 1 plus a2 cos theta 1 plus theta 2 plus a3 cos of cosine of theta 1 plus theta 2 plus theta 3, and similarly we have Py, and phi is actually given by theta 1 plus theta 2 plus theta 3. So if you can see from here, the orientation of the 3 links actually gives the final orientation, or you can say that orientation of these two plus the third orientation actually gives us the total orientation, or the phi, which is the orientation with respect to the base frame. So these 3 relations are actually here to be used for the inverse kinematic analysis, which means we have Px given, Py given, and phi also given for a particular task. Now this as we see, we have now a little more complicated equation. So in inverse kinematics it's all actually about mathematical mathematical manipulation. So in this case, if you see, rather than solving this one completely, we do use some things like, we partition this type of robots where we have an arm, kind of a wrist, the way we do it for example anthropomorphic, which are human like robotic links, where we have an elbow, a shoulder, and an arm. Then we have the wrist, human wrist actually. So human wrist has actually two degrees of freedom by its nature, but because of the elbow arrangement with the link with the wrist, we can assume it to have 3 degrees of freedom. So we can always analyze this wrist separately and the arm separately. So the moment the arm reaches somewhere, then the wrist can orient the object actually in a different way. So similarly in this case also, since this is a two planar system, so we can assume that these two links actually act as the arm to position this one, and then this is for the orientation only. This is the wrist part, so we call this as the W. This point is called as referred to as W, which is known as the wrist point, where we can just say that the third link is used to just orient. So this point will have two coordinates, Wx and Wy. Now if we look at this point now carefully, what we can do is we can do some manipulation in which we see that Wx can be actually, Wx is nothing but the Px and Py of the previous two link manipulator. Alright, so in that case the similar equations result, but if we see this carefully, this is nothing but Px minus A3 cos theta 1 plus theta 2 plus theta 3. If you look carefully, we have Wx actually equal to A1 cos theta 1 plus A2 cos theta 1 plus theta 2. So this is nothing but Px minus A3 cos theta 1 plus theta 2 plus theta 3. So if we know Wx and Wy, we know them, then we can simplify this as a two link manipulator problem and then get the values of theta 1 and theta 2. Now if we look at this right expression, which is Wx actually, so it's Px minus something. So Px and Py, since we know these two are given in the inverse kinematics, but what about this? Now if we look at this carefully, this is nothing but cos of or cosine of theta 1 plus theta 2 plus theta 3, but this is nothing but theta 1 plus theta 2 plus theta 3 is nothing but the phi, and phi is already given to us in the inverse kinematics problem. Now this means that we can easily solve Wx from here and Wy from here. Now which means that we can evaluate this expression again to find out theta 1 and theta 2 as we have done for the two link manipulator. So this is similar to what we have achieved in the two link manipulator, where Wx was actually Px and this was Py. The rest is the same. Similarly, we find out sine theta 2 for this, and then we find out theta 2 using the arctank function, and then theta 1 can be evaluated. Once theta 1 is evaluated, so we can calculate theta 3 by using this equation. Alright, so which actually enables us a closed form solution to the three link manipulator problem, inverse kinematics problem. Now similarly we can do these inverse kinematic analysis for the anthropomorphic manipulators, for the spherical wrist, for the RP and PR manipulators that we have seen, and the SCARA robot and other typical industrial robots can be actually evaluated. Now some remarks to the inverse kinematics. So we may have complicated systems like anthropomorphic robot and the other examples you will see. If you try out some problems with regards to those, you'll see that you may have to do some kind of substitutions, like you will have to use this half tangent formula, which is very popular formula in trigonometry. So where you substitute by a variable u is equal to tangent of theta 1 by 2, and then cosine of that is actually equal to 1 minus u square by 1 plus u square, and similarly sine of that is equal to twice of u by 1 plus u square. So this can be actually substituted in the polynomial which relates the end effector coordinates with the joint coordinates, and then we can get another polynomial actually which can be solved for a particular value of theta. So this type of substitution is generally very popularly used in inverse kinematic analysis. Again, so we have in PR and RP joints, and maybe in SCARA robot we have some prismatic joints. Inverse kinematics actually becomes simple in those cases because you don't have any transcendental functions, because there is no rotation in some of the joints, so there is no sine and cosine function there. Also we have to remember that we need to decouple the wrist and the arm of the higher degree of freedom robots for simplifying the analysis there. So we have seen one example of a 3-link robot. For our information, for any arbitrary 6th degree of freedom robot, we have a 16th degree polynomial for its inverse kinematic solution, for which we don't have any closed form solution, so we have to resort to numerical techniques. This is why it's very much desirable to have these twist angles to be 0 or plus minus 90, or maybe a function of those, or you can say multiple of those those values, because these values actually tend to make some of the computations actually very simple, because they actually go into the transformation matrices, and they also go into finally into the position and the end effector the orientation matrices. And that's why while designing any robot, any new robot, it is always desirable to have a closed form solution to their inverse kinematics problem, because this is considerably important in the trajectory planning and the control of the robots. So we always design robots where we from the in the first instant only would like to structure it in a way so that we have a closed form solution available to its inverse kinematics problem.